This video is brought to you by Erevan's Guide to Death and Beyond.
So I guess I have started what is going to end up being the largest foam building I have ever made. Welcome back to Black Magic Craft. This is already a pretty big foam build, but it's nowhere close to being done. It's going to end up being probably 2 to 3 times taller than it is now. This is just the middle section, and this is not what I had meant to do. What did I do? I started by trying to make a simple tower structure using dollar store foam core. Just something simple that anyone can do. But a couple days later, and this is what I got. I wanted to just use foam core. Cheap dollar store foam core, cut some strips. I used a simple MDF door template to cut out a bunch of arches. So that I could then bend those strips into a circle and glue them to a circular base and stack them on top of each other to make a quick tower. I even got far enough that I had cut out a bunch of floor tiles and glued them down, but it didn't take long for me to realize that it all looked very wonky and was very flimsy and just not good. So after a morning of working on that, I just threw it out. And I suggest you do that from time to time if you feel like something's just not working. Sometimes you don't need to finish something. Sometimes things are just a bad idea or a bad course of action. I started all over again deciding I wanted to make something chonky and hefty and stable. And to do that, I would have to avoid going the easy foam core route. I'd have to bust out some proper foam and a foam cutter, get to work. The first step was picking a height and width for these wall sections, and then machining a whole bunch of exactly the same size pieces. And once I had all these wall sections made, I could use this neat little angle cutter from Shifting Lands to cut the 22.5-degree angle to make octagons. I cut a whole bunch of these angles on those wall sections. I textured them with a rock, and then I glued them together with hot glue. And I found that it was a little bit easier to assemble these by gluing like 2 pieces together at a time and letting them cool off for a moment while I did other ones, so that when I went back and tried to assemble the larger complete octagon shape, all the glue joints were nice and strong and not slipping and falling apart on me. And because I wanted this to be like a playable thing where I could put miniatures on and have some kind of epic battles or whatever, I wanted outer platforms. I started out with round ones, got back out the dollar store foam core, and I used these MDF circles that I got from the dollar store. They're actually supposed to be for making like Christmas wreaths with, but they were about the right size, so it made for a simple little circle to trace onto my foam. Gluing these individual octagon wall sections to the bases is not as simple as it might seem. You need them to all be pretty much perfectly centered, otherwise your tower, when stacked, is gonna look all weird and wonky. So to avoid this, I centered one of them and cut that out on a circle of foam. Then I could trace that onto the other ones and use those lines as a guide for where to glue my octagons. And that worked out pretty decently. But I gotta admit to you and myself that I don't like the way this looks. It's not even starting to look like this grand gothic whatever tower. Looks like a postmodern parking garage. First thing is that the scale is still just like way too small. Like to really look like a big, huge, epic tower at the scale of miniatures, these circles would need to be huge. But I was hoping that it would look cool enough for that to not matter. But something about it just doesn't look right. Like, I've thought about flipping these and giving more space, which kind of visually breaks it up a little bit better. I was like messing around with pillars that I could like wrap around. But I don't know. I'm just not feeling it. I'm honestly wondering if at this point I'd be better off making these into the same octagon shape as the center sections instead of rounds. Maybe that'll look better. I'm just gonna mess around for a while and hope that something jumps out and makes this look good. I refocused again and cut the platforms into octagons to match the inner structure. I just used a piece of foam to trace out the width of these, and butting it up against the inner structure actually made these all parallel and even and good. And yeah, I thought the octagons looked a little bit better. To cover the foam core platforms now, I just cut some strips of thin XPS, textured it, glued them down, cut the angles on it. Figured I didn't really need to do all the individual floor tiles. This project would already take long enough without going that route. The whole thing still looked too simple, and there wasn't a way conceptually for models to get from one level to the next. I didn't want to put stairs and I didn't want to put ladders, so I figured I would just place some doorways. Not even open doorways, but you know, something that implied that there was entrances.
Attention Game Masters, you are invited into Erevan's Guide to Death and Beyond, a mighty 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons tome with over 350 pages of dark spells, unholy monsters, undying megabosses, and their profane lairs. The undying megabosses are playable at multiple levels, making them easy to plug into your campaign wherever your players may be on their hero's journey. These megabosses dwell in their profane lairs, which offer unique mechanics, which turn the lairs themselves into formidable adversaries. If a player may fall in battle, use the innovative player death and resurrection mechanics to have them return as undying creatures or souls caught between the planes of life and death. Grant them boons using the new undead grafting system and allow them to wield the very essence of the afterlife against their foes. Erevan's Guide to Death and Beyond is available on Kickstarter now. Use my link in the video description to take advantage of the great deals during the campaign. If you pledge within the first 72 hours after launch, you will receive the Early Bird Liquid Core D20. And a free miniature on any physical pledges. The Kickstarter offers a massive 40% discount over MSRP, and your pledge will help to unlock an array of exciting stretch goals, add-ons, and surprises. So, mighty Game Master, will you heed the call of the undead and step into the realms of death and beyond?
I did this with a double layer of thin foam to get these door patterns. And to do this, I designed and cut out a quick jig out of some chipboard. I cut some blocks and used some double-sided tape to glue the jigs on the top and the bottom to act as a wire guide and just cut out the overall shape. It's really important when you're doing something like this to do a top and bottom jig. Otherwise, you're gonna get really weird, wonky cuts that just suck because your wire's gonna bend. But even with some simple chipboard jigs, this works pretty well. And once you have a block cut out to the shape you need, you can just cut it into whatever thickness you want. Just a whole bunch of slices, texture those up, glue them together, and put them on your structure. And I chose just to put them on every second one so that I could make less. And I made them alternate from level to level, kind of so that the idea was that inside there was these winding staircases that went up from one to the next. Assembling these layers into one solid structure was a little bit tricky. I wanted to make sure that they were all aligned really well. So I took my time to make sure that, you know, they were aligned as best as I could. And I know a lot of people are gonna be wondering why I glued this together and, you know, didn't make them removable platforms so you could play inside. Well, mostly because the inside's pretty small. Like, that's not a great usable space to lay out rooms. The idea here is more that this was an elevated exterior thing to put minis on. But mostly, I just wanted this to be really solid and sturdy. If these were all different levels, even if I used magnets or some sort of interlocking thing, just bumping it would make it fall apart easily. And I just didn't want to do that. I want to make a big, huge tower that is like one big, beefy thing. So that's why. Again, I just whipped up a quick jig using some chipboard and cut out like 150 of these things. I cut out a lot of them. Yeah, a lot. And attaching them all took quite a bit of time. But I didn't mind doing that. It was pretty chill. I was just watching TV, and I think that was time well spent. Little details like this are what makes something like this actually look cool when you start to look closely. I also had to cover up those foam core layers, so I just put some strips along the outside. Really quick, just glue a piece on, cut the angle, texture it all up with a rock, and call it good. Now, I would say that the detailing on this still isn't completely done. I think it needs a little bit more, like some little pieces, you know, just to like dress things up and give some more layers. This is just one section, what will probably be the middle section. There's gonna be a whole other taller top section that's gonna be narrower and go into some evil looking, spiry kind of turret or whatever. And then there's gonna be the lower sections, which are going to be much wider. I don't know how tall this is gonna end up being in the end, but I expect that it'll be 4 or 5 feet tall at minimum, maybe taller. It's really gonna depend if I lose interest while building it, which I hope I don't do. My other concern is like where I'm gonna put it. I don't have room for a giant tower in here, but it would look cool and I want it. So I'm gonna make it and I will deal with that aspect of it later. It's obviously gonna be fun for, you know, skirmish games or playing some kind of RPG where you're racing to the top or the bottom of the tower in some sort of adventure. Vertical fights, especially in RPGs, don't get utilized nearly as much as they should, mostly because people don't bother to make that kind of terrain. But while building this, I've been sort of conceptualizing kind of like a quick pickup tower descent game. So I'm trying to think of some rules for that, because I think it would be cool to make a simple little game with some fun mechanics to battle your way down a tower. Maybe a game like this already exists that I don't know about. If it does, let me know. Of course, if you want to pick up any of the kind of tools that I use to make this sort of stuff and you don't know what to buy, check out blackmagiccraft.ca. I have an essential equipment page. I link to the products that I use so you can make sure you're buying the right thing. And shopping through those links supports this channel. You can also support the channel on Patreon, which would be most excellent if you did. That is of great benefit to the channel, and it helps me be able to keep making weird stuff like this and making these videos. I don't know, am I crazy? Is this a bad idea? Oh, I don't know, but I'll see you again next video, hopefully with much more tower. Cheers.